please. Right, next up we have Adam, and he's going to talk a little bit about Python, the language. So don't fall in Tsiki, he's going to tell you, he'll show you his Python, don't go there. Just go with Python, the language. Adam, over to you. Have fun.
Hello. All right, this is working. All right, so just this talk actually is going to be, it's going to go over a couple of things like strengths, weaknesses, new language features and whatnot. And I was built this assuming that there was a general knowledge among the audience of they had like at least heard of Python, maybe used it a while ago, but I was told that might not be the case. So everyone who has not used Python before or doesn't know, actually anyone who doesn't know what Python is, please raise their hands. Okay, so it's not that bad. Okay, but I'm just quickly going to recap for the benefit of those few people. Python is a dynamically typed language that's designed to be very readable, very easy to use, but still tries to conform to good conventions and standards so that it doesn't get messy and all over the place. So it's easy to read, easy to reason about. It's generally well performance, can be used in many areas. So it's a great general purpose programming language. That's the niche it really fills. It's quite very successful in. So first things, we're just going to go over just a few of the strengths. Now, some of this might just be a recap. Some people might know some of the strengths, but I think this is a good to get an idea of what's guiding the language. So probably the biggest thing, best way to think about Python and how you decide how it's decided what goes into the core language and how you write code is import this. So these are just, there's actually 19 of these in total. There's only a couple of them, at least the ones that are shorter. But typical things like beautiful is better than ugly, explicit is better than implicit, whatnot. There's also a funny thing about being a Dutchman. No, it's not there. Okay, can't actually see. When you're thinking about how you're writing code or how you're using Python, the Python ecosystem, a great way to think about it is the word Pythonic. So Pythonic is pretty much is a combination of the Zen of Python and also using built-in language features like list comprehension, standard libraries, for example, to keep the code very Pythonic, very nice to read and easy. So what the guiding principles led to is a language with a few keywords, obvious ways to do things that are solid, dynamic, but not easy to do crazy things with, like, for example, Ruby or JavaScript. So there's less gotchas involved. So it is quite a bit safer in that regard. Okay, so also another strength is great support for binary extensions. So one thing that allowed Python to remain in use, especially in the scientific community, is its ability to use like C or Fortran or any other compiled, well, I don't know if there's any, but many other compiled binaries are very, very fast. So those can sit and do those performance functions. Those functions require a lot of compute, or at least computationally intensive, but straightforward, and then Python plugs into it on the top, kind of acts like an orchestrator. So the overall algorithm would be Python, and just plugs in where you need the extra speed to other binaries. So for like, for example, SciPy uses Fortran and C. Python itself, the main interpreter. So Python is just almost like a specification, almost like you can think of ExmaScript, except it's more specific than that. But there are many other built interpreters for it, or compilers. So you have, actually I'll mention a bit later, but the main one is called CPython. And CPython is of course written on top of C, so called many C extensions. So when you're writing in CPython, normal Python, you're basically just orchestrating C functions in the lower level. Okay, so the ecosystem is suitable for many different use cases. So script start times, memory usage is generally kept low. So this is what allowed Python, one of the things that allowed Python to be among the other strengths, to be used widely. So it can be used for scripting, machine learning, linear algebra, web applications, Raspberry Pi, desktop applications, whatnot. So it maintains some enough lightness to go to those areas. And also popularity. So the Python community has a very diverse background, both professionally and ethnically. It's leading to a wide variety of fields all over the world. So I'm probably going to mention a little thing on community, not my community stuff I'll mention at the end, but you also have other things like Django Girls, which teaches, mainly focused on teaching women who have never programmed before to write web applications from scratch. There's Python for Everyone. There's many kinds of initiatives like this. And if you go to a Python conference, you notice a little bit more diverse in both those ways, both ethnically and professionally, than most other conferences. It's less about a specific niche and specific kind of people, and much more inviting. So that's another strength of the overall language and what's not imposed upon it, but what's it become because of how popular the language is and how many other niches are using it around the world. Okay, so just a few weaknesses. Now, probably going to be a few more weaknesses, but of course I'm biased. So it's, it won't, yeah. See, the GIL. Yeah, so it's not going to be any AAA title. And it's actually it's kind of being used in some areas. So AAA applications are quite, games are quite complex. So you can actually use it for like scripting and whatnot. So, but due to the GIL, which is the full, so the GIL doesn't allow you to fully exploit a single computer many cores very easily. It's not so much of a for many of the other applications that Python use it for, it's not too big a deal because you can have just more expand horizontally for more services or whatnot. You can use different kind of interpreters to speed things up. But the GIL is actually a great talk. Actually, I have a link here from Raymond Hettinger about concurrency where he mentions some of the things. But the only place where the GIL is really a bottleneck is this pretty much. Other places, it's actually not really a problem. Doesn't end the world, doesn't break anything really. Okay, so now another weakness is a poor native presence in the browser, Android and iOS, making front-end Python rare and undeveloped except for desktop applications. So on the desktop, there's plenty of Python. I mean, probably almost everyone here actually is running Python on the desktop now if they're using Dropbox, for example. That's written in Python. But there's plenty of projects that you can actually run it on all the iOSs, and there's plenty of projects which make deploying all over the place kind of easy, but it's not top-notch, it's not native experience, so it's not at those levels. Okay, so there's also, it's a minor thing, so it's another language you can just compile to like an executable, like an exe, and you can send it around. You can do that with, well, at least on the Windows, you can do that with Py2exe, but it's not something that's like a first-class citizen in the Python ecosystem. So end-user portability is not so easy. That's another weakness. Okay, performance compared to compiled static type languages. Obviously, it's not as fast as those languages, but among dynamically typed interpreted languages, it's actually, such as Ruby and Perl, it's actually pretty fast. It's most of the times faster than Ruby, and some benchmarks like the trading blows of Perl, but generally among those languages, it's among the faster ones. And remember, this is with C Python, the default interpreter. There are other choices to go way, way faster if needed. Okay, so some notable new language features. So type annotations for functions and variables. This is quite popular with large businesses. So in case anyone's wondering, type hinting, type annotations is more like a standardization for the documentation inside of a language. So you type it, almost like you're defining a type, but it's not actually looked at by the interpreter itself, only by code analyzers during your pipeline somewhere. And that's really, really popular, especially at Dropbox and other companies. Async I/O, so asynchronous is now native and works quite well. Data classes, another way of doing some more typing, so that's kind of popular. Still not a statically typed language. There's no plans whatsoever to make it statically typed, but there is obviously uses for it, and Python wants to take advantage of those. And then minor little things, string interpolation. But this is just since 2015 to 2018. So it's before 2015, from I think Python 3.3 or 3.4, there was actually a moratorium on new features when Python first went to version 3 because of the migration issues between Python 2 and Python 3. Python 3 initially had quite a bad rep, so they put a moratorium on new features, just focusing on trying to get it easy to onboard and more portable, and that was pretty much resolved since Python 3.5, so just been back on and introducing features. Okay, so some ecosystem enhancements. PyPI which is a packaging index. So if you think like npm install or what are the other language ecosystems for easily installing packages, PyPI has recently been rewritten from scratch. The website that handles the packages. There's also some great tools like pipenv, which makes it's actually quite similar to the JSON packaging standards. So it's pretty quite mature now in that regard. So if you're doing web applications or whatnot, then that's pretty much all set. So also MyPy, it's going on more onto the type hinting. So yeah, it's pretty much what I was saying earlier about optional static typing. MyPy is just a static code analyzer. This is just to highlight how popular it's been with many large corporations. And also you can actually just go back for a second. You actually do it with Python 2 as well. It's smart enough to actually figure out what types you're using for most cases. But Python 3, it's standardized on how you define it. Okay, so some other compilers now. So that's actually supposed to be a heading on the right. But anyway, so PyPI is the just-in-time compiler. Actually, one of the makers lives in Cape Town, actually. He goes to Python PyCon quite often. So PyPI can get boost. You know, almost a drop-in replacement for the most part. It re-implements everything in Python, but just-in-time compile and allows for significant speed boosts. Sometimes not, but oftentimes quite a lot. So this is probably the best thing to try first. There are some issues because it doesn't run C extensions itself. That's one downside. So it takes away that one strength of extensions. You might not be able to use all the C extensions available to you. Cython is pretty interesting. So Cython, it basically compiles Python straight down to C code. Now, you can't just take a normal Python file, Python code, and just drop it straight into the compiler, and it'll work, but you won't get as much of a speed boost. You might get a 2x speed boost, which is nice. But if you start adding a few things, like instead of saying def to define your function, you say cdef, and then you statically type, actually statically typing your code, and you then you can get like up to 80 times speed performance improvements. So it's actually scale. So you add as much C as you want. You can go all the way down to C pointers if you need. It's basically just C. But for most people, they just do a few things, just like cdef, things that are slow, just make it a bit more C, and then you're fine. So that's quite popular if you want to have probably the largest performance boosts down to C. Like, it's great scalability. Nutka is quite newer. So they tried to make it so that you don't actually have to do any C code whatsoever to get your speed performances. The author doesn't know if he'll be successful, but he makes some amazing progress and actually does work for most parts. So that's just a nice mention. Jython, Python running on the JVM, and IronPython running on, what's the Microsoft one called again? Your .NET, yeah. Sorry. Yes, I actually used IronPython before. There's a few things missing in the standard library, but it's got improved a bit. I actually did not mean that maliciously, by the way. I literally was drawing a blank. I'm using a Microsoft device, so, I mean, Windows device, and I quite like it. So, and also, Microsoft is a great company. They are a platinum sponsor for both conferences, so they're a great company. Not even saying, you know. Okay, now, other things. Okay, so other thing is just one little mention. So Python has recently gotten quite surprisingly popular in microcontrollers. So MicroPython is basically a Python OS. It's not just like a Linux running a Python interpreter or whatnot. It's literally the operating system is written in Python. There's nothing else under that. I don't know exactly how the low levels work, but that's what I'm being told. And you can buy various small microcontrollers. This one is the reference board. You can also get small ESP8266 devices, which cost like 80 Rand, and they're almost like a Raspberry Pi in the sense you have general purpose input-output stuff, and so you can control switches, you can measure things, and you know, like many people do with Raspberry Pis, except it consumes a lot less power, much cheaper, and much smaller. So I've actually also been playing around with that myself, so it's quite nice. Okay, web, you have Django, Flask, Pyramid. Those are the old ones that are dominant. Django is pretty damn popular, actually. The other two are pale in comparison. So there's also a new breed of API-centric frameworks like Hug and API Star, Hug being my favorite. So they're great if you want to write a quick little, very performant API framework, like a couple of lines, very Pythonic, like Hug, for example. If you want to see an example of Pythonic code, Pythonic framework, I recommend you look at Hug. There's also a new breed of async native Python frameworks, like UV Loop and Scenic. I haven't looked at those, but if you want to get a lot of asynchronicity and get even more performance, yeah. So many people, for example, have moved to other languages like Go or not. Go is a great language, but if the main concern was performance, you can get dramatic performance improvements without having to move to those other languages. If you use stuff like PyPI or Python, or you're using Hug API Store, all the async stuff, you can get like 10x, 20x, even 50x performance improvements. So there's quite a lot you can go. And also how you write your Python code as well. Okay, oh yeah, native, so Kiwi. There's a South African Kiwi developer, which is also an evangelist in a sense, at least by gives his talks. And he goes to many of our meetups here, and Kiwi is actually also the premier way of multi-platform. So if you want something that can deploy, you write code once, and Python deploys to Android, iOS, Windows Store, Mac OS. I think they were playing around with Windows Phone, but obviously that's dead end. So Kiwi is a great project to look for that. Now, one downside of Kiwi is that the way it works everywhere, so cross-platform so well, is that it basically runs top of this little game engine. So if you're running, it's very popular with education for small children, like nice little games, and other things like that. If you want to have a business application which uses the standard UI elements from like you pick up an Android device, you expect to have the button here, looks the same, acts the same, iOS, you're not going to get that. But if you having your own complete experience in the app itself, then Kiwi is great for that. Beware. So I've only looked at Beware a little bit, and I can see here quite impressive, 6 platforms in 20 minutes. It's more of a set of tools. So for web, it also deploys to web. For web, it uses Django. I think actually uses PyQt itself for desktop applications. It uses a bunch of pre-existing Python tool chains and made some of their own ones to easily deploy. But you'll probably have to look it up yourself to get more info on it. But that's another one. And PyQt, of course, for desktop applications. It's quite successful, actually, and it's actually gotten a lot better recently. Most people don't know that because they have terrible advertising. Okay, and applications. Now, when I say applications, I mean where it's being used. So science and education, this is a booming one at the moment. So 28% of Python users are students, according to Python users, according to a survey done by the PSF. So it's actually huge among students, and this is a worldwide survey. But they haven't reached everyone. They're still trying to get to more people, so statistic can go up or down. You have Paizo, Spider, or SageMath to replace MATLAB. I keep saying Matplotlib. No, MATLAB. So people are angry with absurd licensing costs in MATLAB. Then the open source alternatives are all there. Python is probably a very good choice for science because it's quite mature in the area and there's lots of cool tools. Jupyter, originally called IPython Notebook. So actually, I'm curious, how many of you have not heard of Jupyter or IPython Notebook? Not heard. Okay. I suggest that's definitely something worth looking into. So if it's very popular among data scientists. So if you want to imagine having a document. In the document you have code, but that code actually executes. So you can like write some code here, execute it, pops up over there in your document. You just mix code with Markdown. It's a single web file you can easily distribute everywhere. One thing though is that it was really, as I said, it was originally called IPython Notebook, but they wanted to make it language agnostic. So they renamed to Jupyter, and it actually supports Ruby, JavaScript, any other languages. So it's not a Python only thing anymore, but it was originally made in Python, and I don't know if the backend is still in Python or not. Pandas. Pandas is just another data science thing for organizing huge arrays, but it's quite popular. SciPy, lots of tools for science research. And like I said, it has lots of C and Fortran extensions running underneath to make things super fast. So if people tell you that Python ecosystem is like super slow, SciPy begs to differ because it uses the language appropriately, and where it's weak, it plugs in nicely with other languages. NumPy, also another thing for manipulating arrays and numbers. And also South African square kilometer array. They're heavy users of Python. Let me just see. I didn't put it inside there. But if you go to the website, if you look at the projects, you'll see like half the stuff is using Python pretty much. And many of them has also come to previous PyCon ZA events to speak there. So they're quite involved in the Python community as well. Okay, so AI, machine learning, another trendy words. another trendy word, singular. Python has become quite dominant in this area, and popular AI libraries like TensorFlow, Theano, Keras, whatever, those are either written in Python or Python extensions. So so in terms of the world of AI, Python is a absolute first-class citizen. So IoT embedded, so going back a little bit to MicroPython, it's also being funded by the European Space Agency. They're looking at putting it into some satellites or whatnot. I don't know, I haven't seen any recent press releases with those, but it's a government space agency, so it'll take 20 years probably. Home Assistant, that's a nice thing I'm going to use. So, trying to put it over there. Yes. So, yeah, if you look at the source code, like 99% Python, those two. There is Home Assistant, and then there is OpenHab. So if you want to have like a little server in your home that controls all your smart devices, like you buy light bulbs or you buy switches or whatnot, and you centralize it into one place that controls them all for you. If you want to like have a single script that like centralizes them, it makes things simpler rather than having all over the place, lots of different things you can't link up together. So those are what those things do. And Home Assistant is a complete Python one. You write your scripts in Python and whatnot, and it's a new kid in the block, but it's actually overtaking the other one because it is because of Python as well. It is able to move very rapidly, adopt new devices all the time, upgrade itself or whatnot. Well, the project has lots of improvements quite rapidly. So it's also more user-friendly, especially if you want to add stuff. Okay, so hardware development, also I'm not familiar with those. PyHDL and MyHDL, those are just for hardware testing or whatnot. So I actually haven't looked into those much. Okay, so DevOps. So this is the thing. I was looking for examples. There's no clear examples of what's used other than like Ansible, Docker Compose. Docker Compose, though, is dying because it's taken over by Kubernetes, which is fine. But in DevOps, it's obviously widely popular with people writing little scripts. So everybody, there's scripts being written all over the place, people doing things. One of the strong areas of Python, but there's no like, not that many like core orchestration products. Probably if someone could, actually people won't mention it now, but I'm sure you'll find more. It's just widely used, but not in like central products, except stuff like Ansible. I'm sure there's more. I haven't spent too much time looking into that. Okay, and scripting tools for applications. Blender, for example, has it. FreeCAD, was it free? Yes, FreeCAD, there we go. And also PDF stuff and Excel stuff. So Python is very great if you want to generate PDF documents, want to manipulate Excel documents from an external application. It's great for those things. If you want, so generally it's a good choice for many applications who want to have a scripting language built into the application, but they want to be a lot more powerful than something like Lua. So Python is an obvious choice for that. Game, so going back to the game thing a bit, there's not many examples. The one prominent one is EVE Online, for example, using stackless Python, which solves some things. And it's also good scripting languages, like Civ4, for example, uses a scripting language. So I am mentioning games a bit because I know there's lots of people in the Python community, like with Pygame and some other game engines, who are quite happy with it and it works great for them. So I think it's worthy of mention anyway. If you're making your own small game, it's good for that. Okay, so yeah, miscellaneous things. So obviously lots of scripts in Linux itself using Python. It's not on the same level as I think Perl inside the Linux OS and that ecosystem, but it's great, still great for that. Also, if I want to make a quick CLI application, if you use something like Click, it's like 1, 2, 3 lines, and you got your CLI application. So it's pretty great for that. Click is a great library. There's other libraries as well. Okay, there are also obviously many more use cases. So it's general purpose programming languages. People use it for everything. Okay, so major tech companies using it. So I'm just going to go through a couple of them. So Instagram, it's the largest known Django site in the world. So that's obviously a prime example of Django. Like most of the site, when you go through a site, it's all Django and it's the largest one in the world. So YouTube is another prominent one. So before it was purchased by Google, Google was trying to compete with YouTube on features with a vastly larger team. So way more people, many more people. Obviously, Google was a big company. YouTube was just a startup. But they couldn't keep up. YouTube was, they introduced new features. Google just played catch up for the most part. And then Google bought YouTube to solve that problem. And it's still written in Python as far as I know. And oh yeah, by the way, the Google product was using C++, forgot to mention. So C++ versus Python, obviously Python's going to be able to, you'll develop faster with that. Google, so well, this is a kind of ironic, I don't know why Google wasn't using it, but Google was with them from the beginning. It's one of the official languages, and the motto, at the beginning at least, was Python where we can, C++ where we must. That was the Google motto in terms of what language to choose. So I don't know why they used, why they felt they had to use C++ for that other thing. Okay, so Reddit, actually, I can't remember what exact stuff they use it for over there, but it's some. Oh yes, Reddit. I remember Reddit was actually written in Python. Finally, one of the code developers, he actually did a course in Udacity, Introduction to Web Dev. Actually, that's where we learned web development from in Python from the founders of Reddit. So they're actually quite fond of Python over there. I remember. Spotify, so for radio, discover, and recommendations, powered by Luigi. It's one of the libraries over there, so lots of the intelligence behind Spotify is powered by Python. Quora, I can't remember exactly what they use it for, but I promise you they do. I don't have my notes. Don't have my notes here. Dropbox, that's a major one. Actually, they hired Guido, which is a creator of Dropbox. He used to work at Google, but now he works at Dropbox, and it's mostly used server-side. Desktop application is written in Python, as I mentioned earlier, and yeah, it's the prime language over there, obviously. Netflix. So Netflix, they are. If you want to know what chaos is like, then you work at Netflix because they know how to manage it quite surprisingly well using AI, machine learning. And what I mean by chaos is that they have bazillion microservices. People choose various languages, but Python's definitely one of the stronger ones over there. So it's used by alerting Chaos Gorilla. If you've ever heard Chaos Monkey, it's where you deliberately crash your servers to test resiliency of your ecosystem. So if you deliberately randomly crash your servers and nothing goes wrong, you know it's good. Security, recommendations, and many more services. So recommendations powered by Python. And then Facebook. 21% of Facebook's infrastructure is written in Python, with C++ at 35% and C at 15% and whatnot. Okay, now we're almost near the end. So just think with future. So Python is among the top 3 most popular languages. Probably mentioned the surveys of the PyPL and IEEE. They actually recently overtook JavaScript, but that's only 2 of them. It's kind of difficult to. Okay, now when it comes to these things with these kind of surveys, it's difficult to actually gauge how widely language is used. So that's why you look in very different surveys and get an idea. But one thing that's common among all the surveys is that Python is among the top 3 languages, and it's already starting to overtake JavaScript in some of them. And Python's growth curve is very rapid, especially because of the emerging sectors of AI, machine learning, IoT. Well, maybe less slow IoT, but science, use in science, education, all that. Okay, so. Oh yes, Python's one thing Python is as good as I mentioned is emerging niches. Let me see if I missed any of the emerging niches over there. Data science, yeah, I got all of them, except maybe data science. Okay, so also one thing to note is about Guido stepping down. So Guido van Rossum is known as the BDFL, which stands for Benevolent Dictator for Life. He recently stepped down from being the creator of, not from being creator, but from making key decisions on what goes into the core language. And he did it quite suddenly and without succession plan. So this has caused some fear and uncertainty, but it's not going to, I don't think it's going to be a major issue because Guido already was planning to leave a while ago. He just suddenly decided to do it at the moment. And so much of the decision making has already been transitioned to the community in general. And the last major responsibility that he didn't transition, the only thing that people are really worried about, is the decisions on PEP, Python Enhancement Proposals, as in the documents that and the process of deciding what new goes into the language. So, this only affects additions to the core language, and and there have been many recent additions over the last few years. So. There's actually likely should be a moratorium on the new features anyway to not make it go bloated and too large. So, and that in that case is quite fine. Let's see. Oh yes, Guido still works at the PSF. Actually, he's still involved in the community, or he still owns the PSF. The Python Software Foundation, by the way, is the PSF, which just focuses on funding community and protecting the Python trademark. So if you use the logo incorrectly, do something funny with the logo, they'll come and hunt you down. It's not. They're doing it for a good cause. So he's still BDFL, benevolent dictator for life, but he's just a step down from making any major decisions. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so also another thing is job growth. So I'm just focusing on trends. So in Brazil, 4 times in the last year, I believe, 4x improvement in Brazil, 2x in China, almost 2x in India. Also migration to Python 3. So as I said earlier in the talk, there was a whole a problem with migration from Python 2 to Python 3. People weren't too happy, but Python 3 is pretty great now, and it's over 75% adoption rate, so up from, like 40% in 2018. So, sorry, not 2018, 2015, was it 2015 or 2016? 2016, yeah. So the transition is pretty much going to go ahead. In 2020, Python 2 is actually going to be made obsolete, no longer supported. Yes. Actually, there's one thing I also wanted to mention. One thing I want to mention about Python education is it's now, since 2014, it's the top language the majority language used in universities. So most students coming out of universities, at least in the US and other universities around the world, actually, when I went to a while ago, what university I went to, WITS, they, for mechanical engineering, they actually switched to Python as well, like a couple of years back. So it's gaining traction quite a lot over there. Okay, and that's actually it. So just going to mention some things. PyCon ZA, as Malcolm said, is going to be 11th, 12th of October. There's the Twitter thing, the website, so you could buy some tickets. Hope to see you there. One thing also to mention, since we're in Johannesburg, and it's the Johannesburg talk, is also a Gauteng Python user group. We are on meetup.com. You can just look for us over there, just search Python. It's actually, I think it's 3, but we're Gauteng Python user group. Meet sometimes every month, sometimes every 2 months, depending on amount of talks we get and whatnot. And I believe that's pretty much it. Okay, any questions?
Thank you, Adam. Any questions?
How would you compare Python to ASP.NET, Java as a general purpose language? I know that you are obviously biased towards Python, but I want you to try to be as objective as possible and just position it as objectively as possible in the entire programming landscape.
Okay, so ASP.NET I'm actually not that familiar with. How I position it with Java. Okay, so rapid development, obviously, it is it's much less boilerplate to get something started. So if you want to quickly write like a little microservice or whatnot, then it's quite nice, quick to do that. Java is going to be be faster, but it's not that big a deal with the magnitude difference. And as you can do plenty of performance improvements with Python. By the way, as I said, you can run Python on a JVM. So if you're, so the thing is, if your business ecosystem requires you to deploy to JVMs all over the place, then Java is one place you're going to, obviously you're going to want to lean towards Java, but you don't have to stick to Java, you can just use Python. So if you're familiar with the Java ecosystem, you can probably try out Python. I can't actually give, because the thing is they're both kind of general purpose. Python is much easier to onboard. People tend to stick with it when they're learning the language. They say it's more fun. Obviously, actually, mostly I think it kind of is actually. Also the ecosystem. I'm actually not too familiar with I believe with Maven, you have a packaging manager with Maven, and you can get many packages. I'm just going to ramble because I actually can't really tell you too much of a comparison. I can tell you lots of little niches where it might be better or worse, but it's a good alternative for almost everything Java does. It's faster to develop mainly. I think that's probably the biggest thing I'd say.
Any other questions? Charles.
I saw that you mentioned the Raspberry Pi works well with Python. I mean, obviously Raspbian comes with Python pre-installed. for a developer trying to start out with the Internet of Things, you know, and they've got web experience, and they're into Node.js, and they can do JavaScript, would you recommend that they learn Python, or should they, you know, try to get into IoT development using Node.js and JavaScript?
There's actually I think Node MCU, a JavaScript EXMA implementation on devices, so you can stick to JavaScript there. But I believe the Python one, I think, is lighter weight and works on more devices, I believe. So I still recommend that Python be in your toolchain because it's, one, easy to learn, and two, it gives you much better accessibility if you're going to be doing other things like machine learning and whatnot. If you're in IoT, you have thousands of devices deployed, you're going to want to analyze the data or do something with it. So Python is great in that ecosystem. Python is great for prototyping. A nice thing you can also look at is what's called YPi. The company's called PyCom now, actually, and they have like a little YPi devices, like Wi-Fi enabled ones, just like the ESP8266. But they also have LoRaWAN. They have like every kind of network connection technology you can imagine, including cellular phone compared to LoRaWAN itself, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, everything. They have it on the. It's a great development board. For IoT, Python has an advantage over JavaScript, I believe, for those reasons. MicroPython is a much more native implementation, and also a great ecosystem over there, rapidly developing, and it's much more, I think it's better as a general purpose language, for like if you're doing stuff on the back end. But yeah, I do recommend they get familiar with Python to give you more options, especially for rapid prototyping. It's not difficult to learn, you'll have fun. All right.
Any other questions? Adam, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.